Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to this December 26th, 2013 edition of Nightcast. Friends, I'm sorry, I'm having a little problem concentrating tonight. I've got a terrible, terrible toothache, but I'm going to try to put my mind over it and get us through tonight's news, which is significant tonight. Our opening story, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe visits Yasukuni. It's a World War II shrine. And here with this story, the BBC.
This doesn't look like an act of extreme provocation. The Japanese Prime Minister, in solemn mourning suit, visiting a shrine to commemorate Japan's war dead. And as he emerged, Prime Minister Abe was quick to claim that he'd only come here to pray for peace.
I paid my respects to the war dead who sacrificed their precious lives for Japan and also prayed for their souls to rest in peace.
Yasukuni Shrine is also home to the spirits of dozens of convicted war criminals, including the men who ordered the brutal World War II invasion of China. Mr. Abe knew very well how China would react to this visit, and it didn't take long.
The Chinese government expresses its strong indignation over the behaviour of the Japanese leader, which grossly tramples on the sentiment of the Chinese people and other Asian peoples victimised in the war.
On the streets of Beijing, the reaction was even stronger.
I think we shouldn't just sit here and watch what they are doing. We should do something. I think there is no point in talking to them anymore. I am really angry.
China and Japan are already locked in a bitter territorial dispute over this group of islands in the East China Sea. So why would Mr. Abe now deliberately provoke China further? Some here believe an angry China is exactly what Mr. Abe wants and needs.
For Abe's desire to change the constitution, the dispute with China over the islands can be used to say, look, we are threatened.
It may help Mr. Abe with his plans to change Japan's peace constitution. But his visit here today has just put relations with China and South Korea even further to the deep freeze. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News, in Tokyo.
Friends, our opening story is one that definitely has World War II potential to it. Let's take a quick look at our chart. You'll see that the second seal, the second column, containing a red bar where it says red, that's a spreadsheet I set up, as Mr. Armstrong encouraged us to do, to help us understand things better from the Bible, especially when they're complicated. This one, this second seal of Revelation 6 is depicted by a red horse. And Jesus Christ described the activities of that red horse as war and rumors of war and world war, nation against nation. And we certainly have that situation ripe between China and Japan. That nation, China, against the nation of Japan. And today has helped add some fuel to the already inflamed situation between the two countries because of this South China Sea Islands row that's been going on for some time. In Egypt, there's been a bus bomb explosion. Khalid Azalarab reports from Cairo.
The explosive device, according to the Ministry of Interior, went off at 9:30 local time, 7:30 GMT. As it happened, a bus was just moving nearby, and the people who were injured were the passengers on this bus. One of the 5 people is seriously injured at a critical situation. The significance of this attack, if it is an explosive device, as the Ministry of Interior says, is that it would be the first attempt or the first attack on a target that is civilian. There seems to be no military or police targets involved in this. It only seems to be a random explosion in this area. A second device was found and defused later by the police forces, according to the Ministry of Interior.
And friends, my buttons are hanging up some tonight. There we go, finally. The Spanish Basque community is a relatively prosperous region and has moved on in many ways, but violence there of the recent past still cast a shadow. Here's a special report on this by Tom Burridge from Basque County.
On the left is a woman whose husband was killed by the Basque militant separatist group ETA. On the right, a woman whose brother was a member of ETA. He was abducted and killed by paramilitary forces working on behalf of the Spanish state. Now they're friends.
Hola, Mari Carmen. ¿Qué tal, guapa?
They're working together to heal the scars of the past.
They
shot him with one bullet in the head. At first you feel anger. You have so many questions. Why? For what? Who has the right to take the life of another human being? Questions that have no answers. My husband paid with his life just for thinking differently.
In 1983, we had the terrible news he was missing. Our nightmare went on for ages. His remains were found in 1995 in Alicante. Whether we liked it or not, he was a member of ETA. If so, they can pursue him, arrest him. That's fine. But it doesn't mean they can do whatever they like with somebody.
The bomb exploded in the underground car park of a crowded supermarket, causing widespread panic amongst shoppers.
The car park, which shares... In the 70s, 80s and 90s, ETA carried out a series of bombings and shootings.
It's the worst ever attack by ETA.
In many ways, the Basque Country has moved on. This is a relatively prosperous part of Spain, which has weathered the economic crisis better than most. ETA called a ceasefire 2 years ago, and the group is increasingly irrelevant. Many of its members are in prison. But ETA's violent past still casts a shadow over modern politics in Spain.
Asesino! Asesino!
In recent weeks, one by one, amid angry protests, convicted members of the Basque separatist group ETA have been set free from prison after a ruling by the European Court of Human Rights. Some, though, who have studied and written about the Basque Country and ETA believe it could help the peace process move on.
The Spanish right has to make that noise. It had to try and support its own doctrine. Whether some are secretly glad that in the end that doctrine was thrown out, but not by them, by an independent court somewhere else. I suspect, frankly, that some of them are, but they can't say it publicly.
Some people in the Basque Country are working to slowly reconcile the damage caused in the past. But with ETA so weak, there is little incentive for Spain's current government to enter talks. And publicly, at least, government ministers only talk about destroying what most people in Spain consider a terrorist group. Tom Burridge, BBC News, in the Basque Country.
Friends, heavy fighting between government forces and rebels has continued in South Sudan, even as African leaders renew their efforts to mediate between the President Salva Kiir and his rivals. UN Special Representative Hilda Johnson called on the country's political leaders to give peace a chance.
These past 11 days have been a very trying time for South Sudan and for all citizens of this new-born nation. What has happened this last week has, for many of them, brought back the nightmares of the past. The nationhood painstakingly built over decades of conflict and strife is at stake. And for us, one of the most important things is to have those nightmares end. I therefore call on the political leaders of South Sudan to order their forces, to lay down their arms, and to give peace a chance.
And if the suggestion by the UN. The urge by the UN won't do the job. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has renewed his offer of talks to end the fighting, which has left tens of thousands of people dead. His former vice president, Rick Macker, has previously said he is also willing to negotiate, but only if his political allies are freed. Jonathan Josephs reports.
The eastern state of Jonglei has been one of the flashpoints of this bitter conflict. Television pictures from the area show dead bodies and vehicles destroyed by the fighting strewn across the roads around the capital, Bor. Thousands of lives have been lost, even, it appears, under the noses of UN peacekeepers.
I've just come out from the UN compound. What I'm seeing is a lot of dead bodies. And then the other thing that was scary most was inside the compound. The rebels themselves were entering inside with their guns. We tried to ask the UN peacekeepers to protect us.
The fighting is between troops loyal to President Salva Kiir and those under the command of his former vice president, Riek Machar. Kiir is from the largest ethnic group, the Dinka, and Machar, the second largest, the Nuer. In a country where weapons are easily available, the fighting has spread quickly. There are now reports of armed clashes in Malukal, in the northeastern state of Upper Nile. All the while, both sides say they are willing to talk. Riek Machar wants his allies freed from custody first. President Kiir says there should be no preconditions.
I express my willingness for dialogue with Dr. Riek Machar and his group for peaceful settlement of our differences. I also extended the same message to David Yao and all other armed groups who had taken up arms against the state.
Some 10,000 civilians are now seeking shelter at the UN base there. At others across the country, including here in Juba, more than 80,000 are doing likewise. In the makeshift camps, there are growing fears of viruses and sanitation problems. And as these Christians celebrate Christmas, all hope its message of goodwill and peace prevails. Tuesday saw the UN vote to increase its number of peacekeepers to 12,500, and the Secretary-General issued a direct plea.
I once again call on the country's leaders to settle their differences peacefully, and I underscore their responsibility to protect civilians. I have warned all responsible for crimes that they will be held accountable.
Amid the trouble, babies are born in a UN clinic. The hope for their future must now lie with the two warring parties and the foreign diplomats hoping to get the leaders of the world's newest country to talk. Jonathan Josephs, BBC News.
Friends, the president of South Sudan, who you saw in this video, is an ethnic Dinka, while his former deputy represents the Nuer tribes, or the Nuer tribe. Tens of thousands of people have fled to UN compounds across the oil-rich country. The BBC's Anne Soy reports in this next video on the evacuation of Kenyan nationals from South Sudan.
Relief to finally be heading home. These are Kenyans who have been living and working in Bentiu in Unity State. Now, this is one of the major conflict zones here in South Sudan now. And these people tell me that they have been taking refuge at the UN compound there in Bentiu. And finally, help came today. And they have just arrived here in Juba at the airport and just about to leave for Kenya using this Air Force plane.
When it started in Juba, we had it immediately on Monday. We had in Bentiu. They start bombing, slaughtering people.
When those people came, they start beating us, asking us for money. Even they shoot twice in my hotel, but God is great, no one was dead. They took all the money I had and they just left.
Most of these people are traveling with light bags. They say that they have lost most of their property in Bentiu during the fighting, but they're happy to be heading home nonetheless. They have left behind some of their friends, people they know, and people who are in other states that haven't been reached. It is estimated that there are at least 30,000 Kenyans who have been living and working here in South Sudan, and these flights have been ongoing. There are people who've been living by bus, and they continue to be evacuated. And finally, home. These people are happy to be in Nairobi after what has been a long, difficult and an uncertain journey. But they also remember the other people that they left behind, people who are in remote areas in South Sudan, who have no means of getting to the UN bases and who have no means of getting to the capital, Juba, and therefore making their way here. But these flights will continue to evacuate Kenyans from South Sudan as other nations continue to get their people out of the embattled country.
Friends, turning now to Thailand, the Electoral Commission in Thailand has urged the government not to hold a poll in February because it says the risk of violence against candidates is too high. A police officer was killed earlier in clashes with protesters trying to stop parties registering for the poll. The BBC's Jonathan Head in Bangkok says the group who tried to disrupt election registration efforts are a hardcore group determined to use everything they can to stop the election.
These are not the middle-class people that we've seen in the large gatherings and weekends. It's a hardcore so-called student group. They went clearly determined to use everything they could to stop it. They were firing slingshots, homemade bombs, throwing rocks in at the police. The police responded with a lot of tear gas, a great deal of tear gas, some rubber bullets as well. Now, clearly, there were also people using firearms there. It's not just one policeman, the one who's been killed, who we understand was shot in the chest. We've heard that a female nurse was also shot. The state of her injuries is not known. A number of the police who are injured are thought to be in critical condition. So this is a very serious escalation of the violence. I think it's more serious in other ways too. Calling for effectively the cancellation of the election or the indefinite postponement of it is going to be extremely provoking to the government supporters who so far stayed away from Bangkok and said they'd focus their efforts on the election. There's going to be extreme anger on their side that what they will see as excessive violence on the protest side has actually brought the Election Commission to call for the election to be cancelled. This is what the protesters wanted, and by attacking the stadium they appear to have got what they wanted, or at least if the government heeds the Election Commission. It's also noticeable that there were units of the army deployed inside the stadium, but who did nothing at all to back the police. And it's worth remembering the army commander has also called for the election to be postponed, and privately we understand he's even called for the Prime Minister to resign. So there's a growing sense that there is some weight behind the protesters, especially if the army is beginning to side with their demands for the election to be postponed. And that will only add to the polarisation of the country. It will create on the government side, particularly their supporters, a tremendous sense of grievance. So this won't resolve things, although you can understand after the scenes today that the Election Commission's argument that it's a very violent situation in which to hold an election does have some grounds.
Friends, in Turkey, Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has announced a major cabinet reshuffle after 3 ministers resigned over a corruption inquiry. Mr. Erdogan named 10 new ministers, almost half of the cabinet, after talks with President Gül. Environment Minister Erdogan, Bayraktar, Economy Minister Kaglayan, and Interior Minister Güler stepped down after their sons were arrested in an investigation into government contracts. Rikin Majitha reports.
It's a corruption scandal that's shaking the very core of the Turkish state. The Minister for the Economy, the Interior Minister, and the Environment Minister, they've all had to resign. The charge? That they, along with their sons, have been involved in a high-level fraud involving illicit money transfers to neighbouring Iran and bribes for construction projects. They've done nothing wrong, they insist. Minister Bayraktar goes further. In an interview with Turkish television, he blamed Prime Minister Erdogan himself for approving many of the construction projects. If he should resign, so should the Prime Minister. It would be for the good of the country, he argues. Not so, says the man who has ruled Turkey for over a decade. It's outside powers he blames for stirring up trouble.
We are facing an attack against the Turkish people and the Turkish Republic. Everybody's aware that this is not a corruption probe, but this is an obvious conspiracy, a setup against Turkish politics and people.
Foreign conspiracy or not, the government had been totally unaware of the police investigation into the alleged sleaze. Last week, dozens were arrested, including the sons of the ministers who resigned. $1 million was found in one of their homes. A further $4.5 million was found stuffed in shoeboxes in the home of Suleiman Aslan, the CEO of the state-run Halk Bank. This has all led to a new outpouring of anger on Turkey's streets. Resentment towards the government is still fresh from the huge street protests that gripped Istanbul last May. With local elections due in 3 months, this latest scandal may be the biggest threat to Mr. Erdogan's government yet. Rikin Majithia, BBC World.
And friends, in a story that is kind of sad for those who like to go swimming, more than 70 people bathing at a popular beach in Argentina, where they had a big heat wave, have been injured by fish related to the piranha. The attack happened in the northern city of Rosario. And friends, pardon me just a moment. We're having a little technical problem, but I think I just got it resolved. Okay. The attack happened in the northern city of Rosario while bathers were swimming in the river Piranha. Friends, I don't know about you, but I think the last river in the world I'd ever want to swim in is wherever it might be, is any river named Piranha. Dozens of people suffered bites to their extremities, including losing digits, fingers, or toes. Roland Hughes reports.
Just when they thought it was safe to go into the water, came an attack from an unusual source. A cooling morning swim by families in this Argentinian river took a bloody turn when a group of carnivorous fish started biting the bathers. More than 70 people were injured, including 7 children who lost parts of toes or fingers. These were the fish responsible, palometas, relatives of the piranha that are native to South American rivers. One health official said there were some people that the fish literally had torn bits of flesh from. The victims were swimming in the Parana River, near the city of Rosario, but feeding frenzies like this are extremely rare. While the river is a popular bathing spot, it was especially busy because of a heat wave hitting the region. And despite the gruesome attack, many people rushed back into the water to cool off, only half an hour after the fish struck. Roland Hughes, BBC News.
The end of that story, that really surprises me. Within a half hour after this attack, the people, must have been terribly hot over there. They go back into the water after that gruesome piranha fish attack. Well, friends, we got a few minutes. I want to tell you about something related to America and Israel and end-time prophecy. Prophecy describes Judah of the end time as striking out against its enemies. This has been the pattern of the nation-state of Israel ever since 1948. The question remains for next year. The question for 2014 is, will Israel attack Iran sometime in 2014? Genesis 49 details Jacob's last words to his sons shortly before he died. Jacob, under God's inspiration, describes the state of his descendants in the end time. Each of the 12 sons of Israel is mentioned. Remember, the context of the prophecy is in the end time. And Jacob tells his sons, I will tell you what befalls each of you in the last days. Genesis 49, verse 1. Of Judah, God said through Jacob, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp from the prey. My son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Genesis 29, verses 8 and 9. This prophecy, friends, details Judah's prey and Judah having his hand on the neck of his enemies. This describes so clearly the state of Israel, Judah, today. This is seen in the series of wars won by the Israelis against the Arab nations since 1948. Many in America and around the world have praised Judah for its finesse displayed in daring military actions and frequent assassinations of its enemies' leaders. To name but a few astonishing military feats, there was the Israeli stunning victory over the Arab nations in the Six-Day War of 1967, its rescue of Jewish hostages in Entebbe, Uganda, July of 1976, and the surprise Israeli bombing of the nuclear plant in Iraq in June of 1981. America's growing, creeping weakness in the Middle East has caused a regional realignment in which Israel and France, Judah and Reuben, are replacing Joseph, are replacing Manasseh of Joseph as the protector of the Saudi Arabian states, of the Persian Gulf, and France has strong financial interest in the Persian Gulf. Also keep in mind that France has 6 million Muslim citizens who attend mosques that are heavily supported by Saudi Arabia. France is not a friend of Iran. Iran has attacked French targets repeatedly over the past 30 years. Iran does not trust France. France built Saddam Hussein's nuclear reactor while Saddam was at war with Iran. Voicing his anger, Foreign Minister Lieberman said that it's time for Israel to seek out new allies. In his words, its ties with the United States are deteriorating. They have problems in North Korea, Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Egypt, China, and their own financial and immigration troubles. Clearly, America is a declining superpower. And I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heaven as iron and your earth as brass. That's it for tonight, friends. Thank you for joining me for this Thursday night edition of Nightcast. God willing and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again for our next edition of Nightcast on Sunday evening. Until then, your host Stephen Lloyd saying have a wonderful weekend. and we'll see you on Sunday night.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.